Hello, good afternoon, lovely people. Come on in, come on in, my lovely people. It's a little warm today, so if you see me busting out in sweat today, you know why. Ah, so I am here today, I'm here this afternoon because unfortunately tomorrow I won't be able to stream live because it will be a very busy day for me tomorrow, and so I thought instead of missing you guys tomorrow, and I have the time today, I would just come on in today and stream live with you guys and share as always. Yes, I am always excited no matter what my day or days are like, uh, or how I'm feeling. Once I am on live, it does something to me. It lifts my spirit automatically. My spirit is lifted. It lifts my spirit. I feel excited. I'm happy. Everything good you can think of, and you can tell because you can see the big smile on my face, right? That's how much drive, energy, life, and all that kind of stuff that streaming does for me when I'm on to share. And that's what purpose does to us or for us too. When we're passionate about something, and people will always say that when we're passionate about something, it will never deplete us. When we're passionate about something, it will never drain our energy. It will never cause us to feel low spirited. It will never cause us to think twice. It will never cause us to to be anything other than great. And that is why I usually hear persons say that we ought to pursue our passion. We ought to do what it is that we love doing, because it will give us the drive, it will give us the push, it will give us the life. It will cause us to just run quickly, run to the end of the race no matter what. And that is what streaming live does for me, or encouraging or sharing with individuals and you, my woman of worth community. Oh my god, I can't stop smiling. I feel like a kid right now. I feel like a kid right now, but it's just the joy that doing this gives me. And I hope that, as always, whenever I come on to share with you ladies or my woman of worth community, that you are excited just the same to see what I post, or you're excited just the same to join me live to hear what I have to share with you that may be of some form of an encouragement, inspiration, or something that you can maybe get a nugget or two from and gain some form of a wisdom along the way and apply it to your days. Yes, I am super excited. And in stating all of that, let me just get into saying today that the topic or title that I will be titling this one as is called Legacy and Inheritance. Yes, legacy and inheritance. I just want to say that one more time. Today, I'll be sharing on, I'll be sharing on legacy and inheritance. Now, today's theme is inspired by my churches or my pastor's theme for the church since last week. Now, what I mean by that is, though I had made notes of a few things I want to share on since the conception or the genesis of this podcast, I thought it was the appropriate time or the right timing for me to share on legacy and inheritance. And what the theme at my church is since last week Sunday was or is called Legacy Life. So that's my church's theme, Legacy Life. But the title I want to share on today is called Legacy and Inheritance. No, I hope I made that absolutely clear. And I just wanted to share that, and this is not everything because I've made notes of what I want to share on in my phone. That's originally where I started making notes or journaling, and that's because some of what came to downloaded to me was while I was at work. So as the things came downloading, I started making a note in my phone, and so after that I decided I'm going to transfer what's written in the phone to the pages of this journal, particularly chosen for my podcast. And so I thought it's time for me to share on this one. And there are 2 or 3 scriptures that I want to share on today, and one of them is from Genesis chapter 25, which maybe most of you, if not all of you, may be familiar with the story of Esau and Jacob, which they are Isaac's son. And Esau and Jacob, they're twins, right? And Esau was the firstborn. Esau came first, but as we go along in the book of Genesis to chapter 27, Esau sold his birthright after coming from the fields and being very hungry. And Jacob, made a meal and said to him, in order for you to get some of this meal, I want you to sell me your birthright. And Esau did just that. I don't even know if he had any idea what he was doing. Clearly not, right? But later down in the chapters, Isaac became old and wanted to bless Esau specifically, not just because he was the firstborn, but also because he was Isaac's favorite of the two. And their mother, Rebecca, had a favorite too. Jacob was her favorite. Now, let me just say something right here about favoritism with our children. We have to be very careful in saying this child is my favorite or that child is my favorite, because what happens or what can happen along the road or their life is that there can become great conflict between the children or among the children if we openly, especially, say this child is my favorite or that child is my favorite. So let me just state that right there. Now, you may be wondering why I made mention of those 2 chapters in particular. I made mention of those 2 chapters because, in a sense, I think I can connect it to what I want to talk about today, because it was a great blessing that Isaac wanted to pronounce upon Esau, but instead it was pronounced upon Jacob at that point, because Rebecca, their mom, heard Isaac saying that he wanted to bless Esau, and so Esau was to go and prepare a meal for him, and then when he come he would have blessed him. Now, Rebecca, their mom, heard that, and she thought, oh no, that's not gonna happen under my watch. Jacob has to get this blessing. And so she told Jacob of what she heard Isaac saying, and they planned they decided that they were going to make a plan to have Isaac bless Jacob instead of Esau. And that's exactly what happened when Esau went to prepare the meal. And though Isaac, when he was pronouncing the blessing upon Jacob, he was like saying, the voice sounds like Jacob, but the hands feels like Esau's because they're hairy. But nonetheless, Jacob convinced him that he was Esau and not Jacob. And Isaac proceeded to bless him. Of course, after that, Esau came, and Isaac recognized that it was not Esau that he really blessed, it was Jacob. And that's another story in itself. Now, with Isaac pronouncing those blessings, he's prophesying over his child's life, as well as back in the days, when something is spoken or written, it's like it's done in stone. Nobody can overturn it, overrule it, or anything of that sort, right? And so I think I want to say that in a sense, it's like a contract. In a sense, it's like a will. It's written, so it cannot be undone unless another will is written that would make the previous will null and void. And someone may be watching and may be saying, okay, then why is all of that necessary? Now, remember I stated that at my church, the Celebration Church that is, my pastor is on a theme, Legacy Life, and he's teaching on that the legacies that is passed down from generation to generation, or the things that we need to put in place, the things that we need to do in order for there to be understanding, peace, and that kind of a stuff amongst the family when we have our wills rather written, right? And it will lessen arguments, it will lessen fights, it will lessen quarrels when we do that kind of a thing, right? And as we know here in Jamaica, maybe all over the world too, when a parent dies or when a grandparent dies, whatever the case is, when that person dies, and if they have great possessions or if they have anything that is of value at all, and they die and they do not have a will, we recognize that the family now, when they come together, there's no true togetherness. You find that there's more division among them because of the valuables that is left behind. Individuals are, fighting over who should get what and what belongs to whom. And in order to avoid or lessen that kind of a thing, this is why it is important to have a will written, so that we can have that kind of a thing minimalized, right? And sometimes too, when valuables are left behind after someone passes, sometimes it even leads to family members harming each other. Wounds are inflicted, not just emotional wounds, not just mental scars, but physical scars. Physical scars sometimes too. Family members may even think it to not just wound, but to slay another family member. And when I say slay, I mean, yes, to kill over the valuables that is left behind, because this person may think they should have gotten this, or the other person may think that it belongs to them, and so on and so forth. Because I think at this point in time, almost everyone, if not everyone, believe they have some sort of an entitlement to what is left behind. Now, this is a little different from the usual podcast or the stories that I usually share, but nonetheless, there is still something that each individual or an individual can take away from it, can learn. There's something in it, I believe, that can encourage someone or inspire them to make a change and to, you know, walk into transformation. And with this podcast, one of the other things I want to make mention of or state is that in Proverbs chapter 13 verses 22, it says that a good man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. Now, growing up, I don't think I used to hear this particular chapter or verse spoken of. I used to get I have the idea that, or it used to be spoken in such a way that I think back in the days, it seems a lot of parents would more think that the children is who should really, you know, leave an inheritance or do something, you know, something like that. Not to say that we can't help our parents or take care of them as they get old, because we are to honor them, and that is another way of honoring our parents. However, our parents, as the scripture says, that a good man leaves an inheritance for his children. That means my grandmother should leave an inheritance for my mom and my mom for me, and so that the inheritance can be transferred to the next generation, and so on and so forth. And I think too, why leaving an inheritance is so important, it's so necessary, or a legacy, is because we're allowing the next generation to build stronger, to build better, to build more, to have more than enough for the next generation to come, so that they can build on what the previous generation passed on, and when the next generation builds on it, it can then be transferred to the following generation, and so on and so forth. Now, growing up, one of the things I used to think in my mind was that firstly, I've never seen a will before 5 years ago. So all my life before, I have never seen a will. Personally, I've watched movies and that kind of stuff. I've heard people talk about wills, but I've never seen a written will, you know, before my eyes, right? And I don't think I've heard a lot of individuals talk about writing a will even. I don't think so. I think it's a culture thing, I think, in a sense, not overall or in general, but in some ways, I think individuals believe that, you know, whatever they have left behind, you know, whoever is left behind can figure it out. But I wouldn't say I used to think that it wasn't necessary, but I don't think I fully understood the importance of a will years before 5 years ago, right? But 5 years ago, or is it 6 years ago? Wow, time is going by so fast. 6 years ago, I actually learned and fully understood what it is to write a will, have a will, the importance of a will, and that kind of a stuff, and understanding even more what legacy is and what inheritance is. Some may be saying, but legacy and inheritance is the same, but I think there can be some things that makes them a little bit different, and I'll be getting into that shortly. Now, let me just also say this, that sometimes too, the generations before us, they sometimes may not have understood certain things, so, you know, they may have had a challenge in executing that kind of a thing for us, the next generation, so that we can pass it on to the other generation. And it's not that I look at the generation before in a bad eye or a bad light. That's not the case, because what you don't know, you just don't know. But, you know, because the cycle continues. For the next generation, when the next generation comes along and they understand something, or they've seen something modeled that's good, and they can add to it and pass it on, it's really, really important. And So for me, uh, and like my pastor said when he shared in the sermon last week, that the legacy too can be seen as something that passes on from generation to generation, right? And some of those things that I want to add to that, that I believe a legacy is what can be passed down, of course, from generation to generation. It is not particularly or is necessarily of monetary value. For example, it can be a good name. My pastor had also said that, the character, some of the good values, some of the good attributes that, the previous generation possessed, some of the good acts that they may have carried out. And it could also be wealth of knowledge. It could be the faith values, some of the faith doctrines that we've been taught. It's things like those that are legacies that we can pass on to the next generation, that is not necessarily of monetary value. No, inheritance can be seen as what is received after or upon a person's death. And those things, for example, may look like monies or an estate, etc. Now, for me, I believe I have shared about a sister of mine that passed 6 years ago. And when she passed, that was when my eyes beheld a will. Yes, that was the first time that my eyes saw a will. A physical will, a written will, a true will, a will that was valid and that kind of a thing. Now, when I saw that, I was like, wow, 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 wow. And I was so grateful because I've never seen one. I was a bit curious though to know what a will looks like or how a will is to be written. Though not all wills may necessarily, the templates may not all necessarily look or be the same. However, I was so intrigued when I saw it, and I was so grateful because, as I made mention too, that my sister's death brought life to my life in so many different ways that I'm super, super grateful for. And might I add that when my sister passed and I found or came upon her will, I was like not only grateful and that kind of a thing, but when I saw the will, I saw a word in the will that I never saw before either, and that's an executor. Now, when I saw that word, and my nephew, which is one of my sister's sons overseas, who were both executors of the will, I was like blown away, because I was like, oh my God, an executor, what does that mean? And then when I come to understand what it meant, I was like, wow. And I looked it up because I really wanted to understand what it meant. And I said to myself, if my sister could have chosen me to be an executor, or one of the executors, I thought this woman must have seen something upon me that she believed she could trust. Something I think she saw upon me, that I was a woman of integrity, I was a loyal person, and I was not someone who chases money. I honestly believe she saw those things based upon conversations we would have had prior or before, long before her death. And I said to myself, wow, clearly she also sees someone who is very responsible. Yeah? Someone who is responsible and maybe detailed or organized, that would see to it too that the will was executed in its fullness. And I felt so privileged. I felt honored. I felt blessed. Yes, I felt blessed just to behold that kind of information and to be a part of that kind of a thing. And added to that, of course, I was also a beneficiary on the will. Now, as I said, I was just blown away when I saw all that stuff. truly blown away, because I was like, wow, I have never seen anything like this before. No, for me, it didn't matter if I was a beneficiary or not. For me, it didn't matter if I was a beneficiary of 1%, 50%, 20%, 5%, 10%. That did not matter to me at all. There's a saying that goes, if we chase money, money will run away from us. And it didn't matter to me the amount that was to be passed on. The greatest joy for me was to behold a physical will and to have an idea finally what that kind of a thing looks like and what it means and how significant it is for us to have a will written. May I also state that when I saw that, I was like, wow, if a lot more individuals would have a written will, how much easier and better it would be for our family members who are left behind. It would mean that we really love our family members and care so much for them that instead of having them fighting over what's left, as we Jamaicans would say, dead left, instead of having them fighting, quarreling, and that kind of a thing, if we truly care for them, we would write a will, leave a will behind, so that it would make it so much easier for them to be able to divide or split the things that are left behind. And I thought to myself, when I saw this, I said, this woman, none of us, neither the beneficiaries nor the executors, no one, her children, no one had to scratch their heads for anything. No one was running around like a headless chicken, because everything was set in order. She had her will written months before, years before. As a matter of fact, she had a will, and of course you have to update your will. And I just want to add this, that in service on Sunday, my pastor made mention of some of the reasons why we need to write a will or update our wills. And some of the reasons he gave was that when we get married, when we have children, when we get divorced, if someone dies and stuff like that. So upon those reasons are why we should have it, or we should rewrite it, because when those things happen, things changes, hence we need to do over our wills. And I was so appreciative of all those information, because I started thinking to myself, well, that means I need to write a will. At the time I only had one child, and I was also thinking, but write a will, I don't have anything. I don't have a house yet, I don't have a car, I don't have all these things that are monetary value. That was what I was thinking to myself. But when I had a conversation with a client of mine who is a lawyer, she said to me, Aura, having a will, you don't necessarily need to have all those things. It could simply mean you have a legacy of books, which is a wealth of knowledge, which I made mention earlier, what some of the legacies may look like, right? And she said it could be a legacy of books. It could be that you have, if it's even a pen you have, whatever it is that you have that you think means something to you and would mean something to who is left behind, you could very well write it in your will and state clearly that you would want this to be passed down, or that to be passed down to the individuals left behind. And I was like, okay, so that was clear for me. So I no longer had to be baffling in my mind that I don't own this yet, and I don't own that yet, and all that kind of a thing. So when she made that clear, it made it so much easier for me to pen to paper my will. Now, I must say this though, that maybe like some of you who may watch the podcast, I used to think, that a will, if I write a will, does it mean I'm going to die right after? A lot of people have that kind of a thought, that, oh, if I write my will, that means I'm gonna dead now, or somebody will kill me. It doesn't mean that, sweethearts. It does not mean that. What it means is when you write a will, you're putting things in place in the event of. and which we all have to die though. Let me just state that we all have to die, but some persons may think they're gonna die right away immediately, but that's not the case. But in the same breath, we don't know when our time is gonna come. And as I also mentioned earlier in the podcast about the story with Esau, Jacob, and Isaac in Genesis chapter 25 and chapter 27, Isaac was getting old. So he recognized something. Not to say that we have to wait until we're old before we write our will. But if that's where we're at, then go right ahead. You still have breath in your body. You still have the opportunity to write your will. Right? And he was getting old. He recognized that. And because he recognized that, he wanted to bless Esau in particular. Right? Now, one of the other things, I thought was, if I write my will, what would I really put in it? But as I made mention that my sister's will gave me an idea on how to structure my will. And again, as I made mention, every will may not necessarily look or have the same type of a template, but if you can find someone who can help you to guide you on how to write a will, that would be excellent. Right? It could be a lawyer, it could be, I think I just said with the peace, don't quote me on that, but a lawyer for sure can help to guide you along the way. Now, one of the other things that prompted me to write my will was seeing how my sister had things in order, and when she passed, we didn't have to scramble. I remember too, I had an insurance years ago, and that insurance had lapsed because I think it was in the period where we had the recession, and my policy had lapsed because things had gotten real challenging physically, and the savings I had on it was what I was using to make premium payments, and after a while it was all depleted and it was just really hard, so I was not able to keep up. So the policy lapsed, and for years I kept saying to myself, I'm going to open an insurance policy again, but I kept procrastinating, I kept deliberating, I kept putting it off. And it was not until after my sister passed that there was a little prompting. Added to, I had a friend who was an insurance agent, and she used to she kept saying, oh, you're not going to do it, when you're going to do it, and so on. And I said, man, I'm going to do it, I soon do it, and so on and so forth. But eventually I decided after my sister passed, because then I thought to myself, my sister had her will done and everything was perfect. When I say perfect, everything went smooth. Everything that was to be executed was executed. For most part, everything was just done perfect. And I said to myself, this is how I want my life to be in order. And when I thought about it, I have a daughter. I just remember I said I had one daughter only at the time, one child. And one of the other things that prompted me to open that policy there and then, when the young lady, my friend, came by my house, and we were going through some policies. And she said to me, Aura, if you were to die today or yesterday, whatever, how would your daughter would have been taken care of? Who would be responsible for your funeral arrangements or expenses? That kind of a thing. And I kid you not, right there and then, tears fell from my eyes, because those were very profound questions. And I love my child dearly. Love my Pitney, right? And I knew how I was also struggling as a single mom at the time too. And of course, we all, or maybe most of us, may have a witness in our families or persons we know of who, when people dead, how everything can go awry, especially if there's not a will. And seeing that, tears fell from my eyes. Yes, there's a family member, a sister of mine by my mother's side, whom and here she is, she pops on just now, a sister of mine on my mother's side. Hey, sister boo, a sister on my mother's side, because she is in a better or a more stable financial position than I was. I said to myself, or than I am, I said to myself, in my mind, I was thinking, well, my sister could help out. I know she would help out because, that's her kind of a nature. But then I said to myself there and then, that's not fair. It's not fair for us to leave our burden, to leave our weight, especially the financial burden, on individuals, especially those who are left behind. Because when we pass, we leave so many things behind. It's not just the things that are of monetary value or things of value, period. Because again, with legacy, it can be things that are not of monetary value. Inheritance is of more of monetary value. But we also leave debts behind. And so if we don't have things in order, we can leave a heavy weight on our family members who are left behind, and it's absolutely not fair to them at all. So experiencing that kind of a thing when my sister passed by my father's side, I thought, this is the action I'm going to take today. I'm going to open that policy. I'm going to start another policy. And of course, the person, assisted me and directed me so I could start a policy that I would be able to afford at the time, and that kind of a thing. And when I did it, I said to myself, because there's a lot of things that sister who passed that I observed, that I like, that I believe that I've taken on and I'm applying to my life. Likewise, she has left a wealth of knowledge behind, which is a legacy, and I hold those things dear to my heart. Sure, my mom also, she's still alive, she's not yet passed but there is some legacy, I believe too, that she has passed on to me, and I hold those things dear to my heart. And when I did the insurance policy, I said to myself, this is where everything begins for me. I will open another policy and have things in order, so in the event if I should have passed shortly after or years down the road, then at least something is in place. Now, when I finally decided that I am also gonna write a will, I thought to myself, this made me feel at ease and at peace, because if I should pass before whoever I will leave in charge of executing my will, then things would have been in order, things would have been plainly written for them to do, and so they will not have to scramble. No, some persons may be saying, I am too young to write a will. Some persons may be saying, I am too old. Some persons may be saying, I don't have a lot of money. Some persons may be saying, I don't yet own a house, a car. Some persons may be saying, I don't have children, or I don't have children yet. Some may be saying, I am not yet married. I don't have a husband. I don't have a wife. Some may be saying, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to write a will. Now, all these things that you may be saying are things that I myself too struggled with in my mind. It's the very same things that I went through and did not understand the full importance or the reason to why we should have a will or write a will again until after my sister passed. And I am super grateful for that, because it has surely added something to my life that I have, taken on, and have applied the wisdom from it, and will be passing it on likewise to my children, the wealth of knowledge, the legacy, and leave an inheritance behind Remember in the book of Proverbs 13:20-22, where it states, a good man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. So we ought to consider not just our children, but our children's children. How can we make life better for them? How can we make things easier for them? How can we leave a legacy behind for them? How can we leave an inheritance for them? Right? How can we do those things, and what is the significance? The significance again is when we leave a legacy or an inheritance behind for our children, it makes things better and easier for the next generation. And so when we do that, the next generation will be able to impart or pass on. Similar in our race, when we're running a relay and we have the baton in the race, each runner has to pass the baton to the next runner in order for them to reach the end of the race. Now, if that baton falls, they are disqualified. They're out of the race. For us, the generation that may come to understand, that may come to learn, that may come to gain wisdom, insight, or knowledge of something of significance that can benefit us, not just us, but also the next generation and the generation after that, and after that, and after that. We're doing each generation a whole lot of good. So for the generation that may come into all these things, it is important for us to not drop the baton. It is important for us to pass the baton on to the next generation, so they too can run the race great, so they can run the race with endurance. Because remember, in a natural race, when these runners are running, if the runner that started the race runs with all the energy and all that kind of thing that they have, I'm sure it encourages the next person who is standing at the next leg of the race to do their best to run just like how the first person passes on, and it continues. So that way, when they do that, the person who is at the end of the leg of the race, they can run the race perfectly, getting a perfect or a good score. So too, we must run this race of life. In this life here on earth, while we're alive, we ought to do the necessary things that we ought to do to make the next generation better. I must say this, life is not perfect. We don't all have it together. We all are not at the same pace at the same time. We're not all at the same level at the same time. We're not all exposed to the same things at the same time. But for the things that we are exposed to, that we have come into, you know, it is so necessary to add to those things and pass it on. I hope that in me sharing this with you today, it will encourage you to make the necessary move, to make the necessary step to write your will. And let me just say this too, in writing your will, ensure that when you do your will, you are entrusting your will in the hands of individuals who are trustworthy, individuals who are honest, individuals who are loyal. Because if individuals whom you have chosen to execute your will are the opposite of those things, it could possibly create greater woes for those who are left behind. Because you have individuals who will try to maybe rewrite that will, who may try to forge the signature on a will. And in the very same, like I shared earlier with the story with Esau and Jacob, that's exactly what Jacob did. Jacob forged, I mean, it may not be a physical signature, sign it, but he forged his way into his father's arms. He pretended that he was Esau so that he could have received the blessing from Isaac. Let me say that again. Jacob, he forged his way in to his father using Esau's quote, his mothers cloaked him in Esau's clothing so that he would smell like Esau. Though he also had hairy hands, he did that, and the father believed or became convinced that he was indeed Esau when truly he was Jacob. So it was not him who was to receive the blessing. Not to say that we're not to bless all our children. So I hope that, I hope I'm making it clear, and whoever is watching or listening will not take it out of context what I'm saying, but will understand that in the context of loyalty and honesty and that kind of a stuff, the importance of it, why we need to know or have individuals who will be able to execute our wills in that regards. And as I made mention, this podcast today is not the usual podcast, but I hope that you, my Woman of Worth community, you are encouraged, you will be inspired, you are edified today with this information and this knowledge that I've shared, and that you will take the nuggets away from it and apply to your days, so that you can cause those whom you will leave behind to be at peace, so that they won't be at war with each other. Because when those things happen too, and individuals are left scarred or marred, those things can take time to heal. Sometimes, as I made mention earlier, the wounds may be inflicted that it caused death, and there's no healing right there for the person who dies. And for those who are left behind, it can just continue and go on and on and on and on and on. But let me also encourage you today too, if there are decisions that you need to make, if you need to go and reopen a policy, if your previous policy has lapsed, or if you have not yet opened an insurance policy, may I implore you today to go ahead and either reapply or to apply and do what is right, do what is good, so that your children and your children can benefit throughout the generations to come. You're not living this life for yourself. We're not here on this earth for ourselves. The life that we are living here is so that we can impact the lives of the next generation. And so I hope that you are blessed today, and that you will take away all the nuggets that I shared, and that you will see the importance of these things. And remember now, writing a will don't mean you're gonna dead today, you're gonna dead tomorrow. Not to say we know when we're gonna die, but we all have to die at some point. So why not do it right? Why not get it right while you're alive? Do not leave any burden on family members who are left behind after you pass. Set your house in order and make things a smooth transition for those left behind, so that your death will not only be grievous, will not only be sad, but that it will also bring life and joy to the lives of those who are left behind. Like me, when my sister passed, her life brought so much life to my life in so many ways. I love you, but God loves you more. Shalom. Bye-bye.